activists like us lose more than we win. But that's not the whole point, because the calculus of activism isn't always a political result or an immediate reform. The calculus of activism is in some ways standing up for humanity and defining who you are, finding your own identity by standing up for the rights and the freedom for everybody. And that's how you know you're a free person. You know you're a free person when you're moving against the obstacles to your own freedom and to the freedom of your neighbors.
Well, we don't know. That's the amazing thing. We really don't know. And when you look at history and you see people rising up, in our lifetime, you know, I've seen impossible struggles. I remember watching TV when I was a little girl at Little Rock and watching these very young teenagers defying white hate crowds and insisting on going into Central High School. How can you ever forget something like that? You have to say to yourself, I want to be part of that. I want to be part of the most courageous things I've seen in my lifetime. And we've seen Birmingham and Soweto and Tiananmen. I mean, you don't know where struggles are going to go. You're not signing up for a victory party. On the other hand, you're not signing up to lose, because I believe that people are righteous. I believe people want to make meaning in their life. And we've seen example after example where people stand up to overwhelm what looks like overwhelming odds and actually emerge with concrete victories.
Optimism is the belief that you know what's coming. Optimism is deterministic, so is pessimism. But we don't know. Nobody knows. The day before Rosa Parks sat in on that bus, nobody predicted the Black Revolution of the 60s, of the 50s and 60s.
Even she didn't.
Even she didn't. But the day
because
after...
she'd done it before, right?
Yeah.
So, you know...
You don't know. But the reason that we have hope is precisely because we don't know. We have hope because we don't know. We have hope because we see example after example of the unbelievable capacity of human beings to love one another, to care for one another, and to build a beloved community. That's what we want to be a part of.
It's miraculous. Who could have imagined people showing up at the airports? I mean, that was so inventive and so creative, and it happened boom, boom, boom across the country like crazy. Like it was like a prairie fire, right? It was a totally imaginative tactic. And I think, you know, our experience at the Women's March in DC, we happened to be there thinking that it was going to be President Hillary and we were going to have a peace march. We happened to be there. These things have shown such creativity, and they're really being run by young people. They're not being controlled by people from the 60s or, you know, political hacks or people who think they have answers. So to me, the inspiration is to be part of something bigger, and we don't know where it's going to go. But the possibility of more justice, more peace, more liberation, how can you resist that? I'm thinking, because you mentioned Rosa Parks, I'm thinking about my granddaughter who can't get enough of Rosa Parks, and we've bought every book we can find about Rosa Parks, but for some reason, my youngest granddaughter has been just taken with this story from day one, and she adores it. I don't know where I don't even know what she'll remember when she's 20 or 25, but that notion that you can stand up or sit down and actually galvanize people around you, or keep walking and no longer take the buses, and then make them give in a little bit. It's so crazy. Isn't it crazy? I mean, look at the monuments coming down right now in New Orleans.
Oh my God.
That goes back to Bree Newson to some huge extent, you know, this one courageous woman, you know, who shimmied up and took down the Confederate flag. Now, that's not all that's going on. All this right-wing stuff is going on, but it's also true that we're looking at the history and cleansing the history, and people in Montgomery are marking the lynchings in American history instead of the Confederacy. You know, I get inspired.
We have a deep, deep social problems, but you can map over the gun violence in Chicago. You can map unemployment, the closing of schools, the lack of jobs, the lack of opportunities, the lack of transportation,
in those communities,
the disinvestment, the lack of mental health, the lack of drug clinics. So it's not like this is accidental. It's not something that just spontaneously happened. This is orchestrated, and it's something that we can resist, and we are resisting. Black Lives Matter in Chicago, undocumented and unafraid in Chicago, are movements that are actually challenging all of it. They're not just challenging police violence. When you talk about the killings of citizens by citizens, that's a terrible, terrible tragedy. But let's not forget that the killing of young black people by organized police forces is something that's been consistent in this country from the beginning up until this week. So that's something that we have a responsibility to challenge. In Chicago, Black Youth Project 100, Black Lives Matter have taken a stand and said the cause of violence in our communities is an occupying force. If I say to some of the friends I have from the northern suburbs, you know, the police act like an occupying force in certain neighborhoods, they say, well, I don't feel that. No, you don't feel that, because in your neighborhood, they're acting as people who are public servants. But in some neighborhoods, they're not. People have to open their eyes and see the reality as part of the steps towards rebuilding community, reimagining what education could look like, rethinking what mental health should be in a community, reinvesting in jobs. Then we begin to solve the gun violence problem.
I just want to say, I don't think there's a simple answer to the gun violence in black communities in Chicago. But I do think that you have to say that young people with high-powered semi-automatic weapons that cost $200 that they can get, if you ask the community, how long will it take you to get a gun like that in your hand? And they'll say, do you have 30 minutes? Now, that's an adult problem. That is an adult problem. And I think that, the wherewithal to solve that problem is in our hands. It is really in our hands. And it's a challenge, but it's a real possibility in Chicago. It doesn't have to be like that. And I think that's why the movements that have united have this 3R idea, resistance, meaning resistance to the powers that be, to capitalism, to
police
Trump,
violence.
To police violence. And I'm going to forget.
Resistance, reimagine.
Reimagine, so you can actually see a healthy community, schools that work, jobs that have meaning making as well as a decent income in life, and rebuild. Because communities that have no tax base, can't keep their schools open, those are the communities we're talking about, where kids get guns, they're put in their hands, and they act the way they've seen on television. And it's a tragedy, but it's our responsibility to stop it. It can be stopped. It's not endemic. It's not human. It's anti-human. We're not
They inspire us.
them.
We don't need to mentor them. We don't need to inspire them. They inspire us. We were sitting
but also
in a,
there's a rhythm. Can I just
Sure.
jump in? Because I think, there's a rhythm. We had a family of 3 boys. We took care of our Alzheimer's parents for 7 years for one side and then 5 years for another side. So we weren't sitting in and demonstrating every day of our life. Sometimes we were, sometimes we weren't, sometimes we draw straws to see who was going to go down. When they resumed capital punishment in Illinois, we had to draw straws to see who was going to go down and stand there and oppose capital punishment.
and who was going to put the kids to bed.
We abolished, the death penalty. It took another 10 years in Illinois to abolish it. But who knew that could happen? When I say we, I don't mean us too. I mean a group of us who thought we could do it. And so these things that seem impossible, that are made to seem impossible and intransigent, actually happen. And when you see it happen, you realize, oh, wow. If it can happen here, if we can stop legal executions, then we can stop the trafficking in weapons that go into the hands of young children.
Yeah. There's a deathless phrase from Margaret Thatcher, there is no alternative. And our job as activists is to always say, there is an alternative. There are many alternatives. Standing right next to the world as such is a possible world. We need to organize toward that possible world, a world that's more peaceful, more just, more humane, more loving. And we can do it, and we are doing it.